Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't, please hit the subscribe button down below. Also, please smash that like button. So, all right, we left off in the first video, and we are going to watch Amber's testimony from this past week. I have that ready to. I have that ready to share with you guys right now. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to watch Amber's full testimony together and react to it. So here we go. All right, here we go. Okay. All right, here we go.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. All right, your next witness.
Your Honor, defendant calls Amber Heard.
All right, Ms. Heard, if you come to the stand, please. Yes, ma'am. Water. All right. Thank you, ma'am. Just a reminder, you're still under oath, okay?
Of course, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, your question?
Amber, just to orient you and the jury, at this time, we are in the rebuttal to your counterclaim against Mr. Depp. So I'm going to confine my questions to that, okay?
All right.
How have you suffered publicly as a result of the Depp-Waldman statements?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
I am harassed, humiliated, threatened every single day. Even just walking into this courtroom, sitting here in front of the world, having the worst parts of my life, things I've lived through, used to humiliate me. People want to kill me, and they tell me so every day. People want to put my baby in the microwave, and they tell me that. Johnny threatened, promised me that if I ever left him, he'd make me think of him every single day that I lived.
Wow, this
Objection,
is
Your Honor, non-responsive.
really good acting.
I'll sustain the objection as to that. If you want to ask the question.
Amber, how did Mr. Depp's statements and threats to you that you were discussing, how do those continue to manifest themselves today?
In the harassment and the humiliation, the campaign against me that's echoed every single day on social media and now in front of cameras in this room. Every single day I have to relive the trauma. My hands shake. I wake up screaming.
Join the conversation. Click the link that is pinned at the top of the chat.
A set of unspoken rules about how to not scare me.
Objection, hearsay.
Yes, sir.
Unspoken rules
Overruled. Go ahead.
about how to not touch
Oh wow,
me.
she just
to
went in
surprise
and out
me.
of that really quick.
My
and
intimate
easy.
partners have rules about how they can deal with me, how they can touch me. I have rules for doctors and medical professionals I see, gynecologists I see. I live my life with these sets of rules that I have to follow, my friends have to follow for me not to have a panic attack or a triggering event where I relive the trauma. Even if I'm training to do my movie, for instance, if I'm training for Aquaman, a combat scene and a trigger happens, I have a meltdown and have to deal with that. The crew I work with have to deal with that because of the damage I walk around with every single day. From what
Oh,
I've
wow.
lived through,
She's really going in hard on the
and what I've
emotion.
survived. I'm not sitting in this courtroom snickering.
Yeah, you are.
I'm not sitting in this courtroom laughing, smiling, and making snide
Yes,
jokes.
you are.
I'm not.
Why?
This is
We
horrible.
just watched
This is
footage of her
painful.
doing this.
And this is humiliating for any human being to go through.
Where are the
And
tears?
perhaps it's easy to
where
forget
are
that
they? I don't
I'm
see
a
any
human
tears.
being.
It looks really dry to me.
And even though
Come
Johnny
on.
promised that I deserve this and promised he'd do this, I don't deserve this. I want to move on. The statements, the attacks on me, the campaign, that Johnny has elicited millions of people to do on his behalf when he himself
Objection, Your Honor,
couldn't
lack
do
of
it.
foundation.
Torture me every day.
Speculation.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Amber, how have the Depp Waldman statements impacted your ability to do charitable work?
You know, the only reason that people like Dr. Kirby can sit up here on the stand and say I'm high functioning and I do things like have hobbies and have interests is
Objection,
because I'm not,
non-responsive.
Your Honor, Mr. Depp gave long-winded responses yesterday.
Overruled, good.
it's because I found a solution to that pain. I woke up every morning with panic attacks and trauma until I realized I could do something with it. So to answer your question, Ben, I was able to turn the things that I've lived through, my pain, my life experiences, into work, into action, into providing a voice for other people. I'm not a saint. I'm not trying to present myself as one, as you all know, but I selfishly found relief in being able to use what
Yeah,
I've lived
she's
through
definitely going hard
to
on the
advocate
emotion.
for others, to bring light to these issues, to give a voice to people who don't have the voice and the platform that I have.
Oh, wow.
And while I would not wish this situation on my worst
Wow.
enemy, if it gives a voice to someone who doesn't have it,
Wow.
but I now,
wow.
as I stand here today, can't have a career. I can't even have people associate with
You
me
can't
because
have
of the
a
threats
career,
and the
yeah, no
attacks that they have to
kidding.
endure.
Objection,
when they are.
non-responsive.
And I can't do my charity work.
Sustain the objection.
Amber, other than the threats that you've described, what other threats have you endured since the Depp Waldman statements were made?
I receive hundreds of death threats regularly, if not daily. Thousands since this trial has started. People mocking my testimony about being assaulted, making fun of my.
Objection, relevance. Non-responsive.
Goes to damages.
Because no one believes you. That's why we're
You can
mocking
continue.
you. Yeah.
It's been agonizing, painful, and the most humiliating thing I've ever had to go through. I hope no one ever has to go through something like this. I just want Johnny to leave me alone. I just want him to leave me alone. I've said that for years now, and I thought he would after
Objection,
2020.
non-responsive.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Another objection by Camille.
What do you hope to reclaim
Oh
after
my
this is over?
God. This woman
Protecting
is so
the secret that I
infuriating. So
did for as long as I
infuriating.
did has taken enough of my voice. Johnny has taken enough of my voice. I have the right to tell my story. I have the right to say what happened to me. I have the right to my voice and my name. He took it long enough. I have a right as an American to talk about what happened to me, to own my story and my truth. I have that right. I hope to get my voice back. It's all I want. And I've said that from day one.
Thank you, Amber. I don't have anything else.
All right, cross-examination.
Oh, okay. Cross exam. Here we go.
Actually, Your Honor, may we approach very
Yes,
briefly?
yes. Yeah.
I heard this was, or I definitely saw clips of this cross, and it gets pretty spicy at some points. That's for sure. Let's see if we can skip through whatever this is. Yeah, I'm glad we're skipping through this. Okay. Hold on. We're almost there. Wow.
Ms. Heard, you just testified that this case has been very hard for you. So let's
Here we
talk
go.
about that and why.
All right.
Your lies have been exposed to the world multiple times, right?
I haven't lied about anything I've been here to say.
You sat here and told this jury that the events in Hicksville started with Mr. Depp getting really upset about a woman leaning on you. Is that correct?
Yes, that's effectively what happened, yeah.
You testified that he actually grabbed that woman's wrist and twisted it, right?
And told her that he could effectively break her wrist by saying he knew how many pounds of pressure, or asking her how many pounds of pressure it took to break a human wrist.
But your own witness, your former best friend, Rocky Pennington, she didn't corroborate that, did she?
I'm not quite sure what part of that night she saw. There were a lot of people there.
She didn't testify that Mr. Depp grabbed anyone's wrist in Hicksville.
Again, I don't know what Rocky saw. There were a lot of
Right.
people
I'm
there
sure
that
you
night.
don't know.
You testified that once you brought Mr. Depp back to your trailer, he trashed it, correct?
That is correct.
And the manager of the Hicksville trailer park was furious that Johnny had wrecked the whole thing. Do you remember that testimony?
That's correct.
Well, we heard from that manager of the Hicksville trailer park, Morgan Knight, on Monday, didn't we?
I'm not quite sure who that guy was or if he had any involvement in this. I know a lot of people have come out of the woodwork to be involved.
So you're accusing Mr. Knight of testifying and committing perjury?
I'm not accusing anyone. I just don't recognize that man.
You heard Mr. Knight testify that it was actually you who was upset with Mr. Depp spending time away from him. Isn't that correct?
Oh, wow.
How would he know? He wasn't there.
You heard Mr. Knight testify
How
that it
would
was
he know?
actually
He
you
wasn't
who was
there.
yelling
Like,
at Mr.
shut
Depp.
up.
Again, I've heard a lot of people say a lot of things to be
She's
involved in the
always
Johnny
looking
Depp show.
at the
but
jury. Always looking
wasn't
at the
there.
jury. Why?
He doesn't know.
Why?
And he
Leave
certainly
him
doesn't know what
alone.
happened behind closed doors, like most people.
So you're calling Mr. Knight a liar?
I am saying he wasn't there, and what he testified to doesn't match what I know happened. But I don't fault him. He wasn't there, so how would he know?
He testified he was there, Ms. Heard. Did you hear that?
That's his testimony, yes.
So you're calling him a liar.
I'm just saying he wasn't there.
You heard Mr. Knight testify that the trailer wasn't trashed, and that's why you're calling him a liar.
He testified that a light fixture was broken, similar to the way that
Yes,
Johnny's
other than a light
employees
fixture. That was
testified
the
to
only
my
thing that was
closet
broken,
being
right? Ms.
rearranged
Heard?
and things
Ms.
like
Heard?
that.
The only thing that was broken in the trailer, according to Mr. Knight, was a light fixture. Yes or no?
I realized that he summed it up by saying a light fixture was broken, just the way his security guard summed up him trashing my closet as being rearranged.
Your Honor, I'm going to move to strike everything after he summed it up, that it was a light fixture, as non-responsive.
She answered the question, Your Honor.
Overruled.
And the security guard testimony, Your Honor?
I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Mr. Knight also testified that he charged Mr. Depp
Ooh.
only $62 for the damaged
Getting
light fixture. You
spicy.
heard that, correct?
I did.
In Hicksville, you were the only one that was jealous that Mr. Depp was spending time from other people. Isn't that correct?
That is
In Hicksville, you were the one who was upset that Mr. Depp wasn't giving you enough attention.
incorrect again.
Ms. Heard, you told this jury that you had no idea the press was going to be at the courthouse when you got your TRO on May 27th, 2016. Do you remember that testimony?
I said I did not have anything to do with it. Yes.
No. My question again. You told this jury that you had no idea that the press was going to be outside after you got the ex-parte TRO on May 27th, 2016. Do you remember that testimony?
I apologize. I must have misunderstood Ms. Vasquez. I actually had no idea whether they were going to be there or not. When I walked into the courtroom that day, it was completely quiet, still,
Welcome to the room.
Even
Anybody
though I had
that's
given
new,
Johnny's
please
team notice that I was
subscribe.
finally
Hit the
here.
like
Your Honor, this is
button.
not
Also, there's a
responsive.
link
Just
that's
right.
pinned to the top of
And
the
Your Honor,
chat.
I would also ask
Where
that you
you can
instruct the
click it
witness
and
to
join
please
me
stop
on
talking once I
screen
lodge
where
an
we can
objection.
Your Honor,
discuss
she's trying to answer the
the
question as
Johnny
best
Depp
she can. And Ms.
trial. I'd love to
Vasquez
do
is
that with you guys.
misrepresenting
So,
what she testified
yeah,
to.
welcome.
I'll strike the last part as non-responsive.
Definitely,
Just answer the
chat in
questions
the
asked. Okay,
chat.
thank you, Ms. Heard.
That sounded so stupid.
In fact, you
You know what I
testified that you
mean,
were,
just
quote, shocked when you saw press
Talk in the chat.
when you were
and
leaving the courthouse.
Come up on the
Yes?
screen if
Yes.
you'd like.
You weren't shocked at all, though, were you?
Incorrect. It was
You knew the press
horrifying.
would be at the courthouse, right, Ms. Heard?
No.
Well, you
Yes,
did bring your publicist
she
to the
did.
courthouse with you on May 27th, 2016, didn't you?
I sure did. I'm a public figure. I brought my publicist in case it blew up. In case. And
You
I'm
actually
glad
had
I did.
alerted TMZ that you would be filing a TRO against Mr. Depp that very
No,
day,
I did
didn't
not.
you?
No, I did
The
not.
one day you didn't bother to wear makeup to cover up the mark on your face.
I did not call TMZ or any other news source or paparazzi source. No one.
Well,
I
we
never
heard
did that.
testimony from former TMZ employee Morgan Tremaine yesterday, correct?
Did I hear his testimony?
Yes.
Yes, I was here.
Yes. And you heard Mr. Tremaine's testimony that he knew to dispatch the paparazzi to the courthouse on May 27th, right?
I heard him say that he knew that, yes.
Yeah, and that he dispatched paparazzi to the courthouse to capture a picture of an alleged bruise on the right side of your face. Do you remember him saying that?
I remember him saying that.
That information must have come from your team, right, Ms. Heard?
Absolutely not. Why would I want that? What actual survivor of domestic violence wants that?
Now, the video
Oh
of
my
Mr. Depp beating up some
God.
kitchen cabinets, you admit that you took that video, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you acknowledge that the video was released online the day before you were deposed in connection with your divorce from Mr. Depp in August of 2016, right?
I believe it was, yes.
But you testified that you had absolutely nothing to do with the video's release, right?
Absolutely not.
And you testified that you learned about it when you landed after flying into LA. Do you remember that testimony?
Upon touchdown is when I was alerted to the video's
You
existence
heard Mr.
online.
Tremaine testify that about this video as well yesterday, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you heard Mr. Tremaine testify that TMZ received the cabinet video the same day you landed at LAX. Yes?
I don't know if that's what his testimony was. I'm sorry.
You heard Mr. Tremaine testify that the cabinet video was posted 15 minutes after TMZ received it. Yes?
That's what I heard him say.
And that this could only have been possible if the video was received directly from the source. Yes?
I heard him say that. I don't know if that's true or if that's possible because
you
it didn't
heard
come from me. I was
Mr.
flying.
Tremaine
So
testify.
I know that's incorrect is what I mean to say.
Another liar on the stand.
I just know that that's incorrect.
Right. And you heard Mr. Tremaine testify that TMZ owns the copyright to the cabinet video, right?
That's news to me.
The cabinet video you filmed of your then husband. Yes?
The copyright ownership of that is news to me. I learned that yesterday.
It's the cabinet video that you captured of your then husband. Yes?
That is correct. I did capture that video. And
The
yes,
cabinet
that was my
video-
husband.
The same cabinet video that was released the night before you were deposed in your divorce. Yes?
That's correct.
You must have also heard Mr. Tremaine testify that the version of the cabinet video that TMZ received was incomplete compared to the video the jury saw in this trial. Did you hear that?
The video that you have seen is complete.
Right. But the one TMZ got the day before your deposition in the divorce was incomplete.
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
He testified that at the beginning portion of the video where you set up the camera, that wasn't included in the video that TMZ received.
I don't know what video TMZ
I'm talking
received.
about Mr. Tremaine's testimony, Ms. Heard. Let's just
Yeah,
asking
you
if
do
you're
know
repeating
what
his
video
testimony.
TMZ
No, I'm asking
received.
you if
Come
you
on.
recall hearing
Allegedly.
him say those words to this jury.
Yes,
under oath.
I heard his testimony.
Oh my God, I
Yelled it.
forgot the banner.
And he
Hold
testified
on.
that the end of the video where you can be seen smirking I know you testified earlier that you haven't been smirking in this trial, but you sure were caught on camera smirking in that video.
I disagree with that.
Was also not included in the TMZ video.
Everyone can watch that video and you can determine whether you think it's funny to me or not.
That's because the video came from you, right, Ms. Heard?
No, it did not.
You
That
edited
video
out
did
the
not
portions.
come to me. I
Ms.
mean,
Heard.
come from me.
Ms. Heard, you edited out the portions that made you look bad before sending it
Miss
to
Heard,
TMZ.
Miss Heard. I love it.
We're very wrong about that.
So
If
that
I
only
wanted to
Mr.
leak
Depp
information, I
looked
could have
bad.
done it in a more effective way, a lot sooner and a lot more.
Because
I
we
was
Whoa.
knew
leaking
how to
a
do that,
mountain of
right?
this evidence. If I wanted to
More
leak it, I could
effective
have done
way.
a lot more with it.
Wow.
That you testified earlier in this trial that you didn't know how to leak things.
I
Remember
don't.
that? Right. You edited that video before you gave it to TMZ
Right.
so that only
Amber
Mr.
Heard
Depp would look
doesn't
bad.
know how to
Yes?
leak
That's
things.
absurd.
Give me a break.
Right in the middle of your divorce proceedings.
Again, you're very wrong.
I'd like to show you a picture from that's already admitted into evidence. It's Defendant's Exhibit 799. This is you at the courthouse on May 27th, 2016, when you got your domestic violence restraining order against Mr. Depp, right?
It is.
And next to you is a woman named Jody Gottlieb, right?
Yes, yes.
Jody Gottlieb is your publicist.
And dear friend.
Now I'd like to show you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit
And dear friend.
1316.
Hello, welcome.
This is a picture of
Hit
you
the
and your friend
subscribe
Rocky
button,
Pennington,
hit
right?
the like button.
That is correct.
Come
Your Honor,
into
I'd
the
like to
chat,
move to admit
join the conversation.
photograph?
Any objection to 1316?
No, Your Honor.
All right, 1316 in evidence. You can publish to the jury.
This is a picture of you on May 28th, 2016, right, Ms. Heard?
I don't know when this was taken.
This is the day after you obtained the domestic violence restraining order against Mr. Depp, right?
I have no idea when this image was taken. I did not take it.
There's no bruise on your face in this picture, is there?
Again, I don't know when this was taken. And also, I'm outside.
Ooh,
I was obviously wearing
Amber
makeup.
is- yeah.
I have no idea when this was taken, so I have
She's
no
not
idea
gonna
if I
play.
can
Let's
speak to
refresh your
what
recollection.
bruise you can
Let's
see or not.
refresh your recollection about when this picture was taken. Can we please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 1315, just for the witness? This is an article dated May 30th, 2016, right, Ms. Heard?
That's what it says, yes.
And this article contains the same photograph of you and Ms. Pennington we were just looking at, yes?
Yes, I see that.
And the article is entitled, Amber Heard Smiles as She Puts Arm Around Friend One Day After Getting Restraining Order Against Johnny Depp. Is that what the title says?
I know that's what the title says, yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to move to admit and publish the article with
Mhm.
everything but the headline and date and the photo redacted.
Objection, Your Honor. That's inconsistent from the way you've treated all of these.
I'll sustain the objection. All right, next question.
Let's take a look at picture Plaintiff's Exhibit 1317. This is also a picture of you and Ms. Pennington on May 28th, 2016, isn't it?
I don't know when this photo was taken, but it looks like the same outing as
Yeah,
the picture prior.
yes, you do.
Your Honor,
You know
I'm
when the
going to
photo
move
was
to admit
taken.
and
You know when it
publish
was.
Plaintiff's Exhibit
Give me a break.
1317.
Any objection?
No, Your
All
Honor.
right, 1317 in evidence. You can publish.
There's no bruise on your face in this picture either, right?
I disagree. If it is taken when you represent it was taken, then obviously there's a bruise on my face. It's covered by makeup as per usual.
Let's zoom out of that picture for a moment, please. Thanks, Tom. That's Josh Drew in this picture, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Pennington
That is correct.
in there too?
That
Ms.
is correct.
Pennington submitted a sworn statement on your behalf in support of your domestic violence restraining order, didn't she?
I believe she did, yes.
Mr. Drew also submitted a statement in support of your domestic violence restraining order.
I believe they both did, yes.
Ms. Heard, I'd like to show you Defendant's Exhibit 512, which is already in evidence. You've seen this photograph before, right?
I have.
On the second day of your direct testimony, you testified that this was taken in the downstairs of the main apartment on December 15th, 2015. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I believe so.
So it's your testimony that Defendant's Exhibit 512 reflects damage to Penthouse 5 that occurred during the December 15th, 2015 incident. Yes?
I'm not quite sure from what incident this is when I see this photo in a vacuum without context.
Let's give you that context. Can we please, thanks. I could have day 16 trial testimony. Your Honor, may we approach?
All right.
Hello, everyone. Look at Amber. Remember when she said she didn't
Could you please
smirk in
turn
the
first
courtroom?
to page
Or laugh? Give me a
4585?
break.
Sorry, one second.
Specifically starting on line 16, where it says, let's talk about December 15th, 2015.
You said 4584. I'm on 4485. Sorry, you said
Mhm.
4584.
4585.
And this is why I got the
Line
the
16?
Law and Crime YouTube channel videos this time, because they literally show you every angle.
Line 16, where it says, let's talk about December 15th, 2015. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then do you see that your testimony about December 15th, 2015 follows?
Let's see. It's just the first line or two. Yes.
Okay. Now I'd like you to turn to page 4603. Starting at line 12. 4603. Starting at line 12 and going on to page 4604, line 4.
I love when they're just like going through the evidence and just not saying
Okay.
anything.
And do you see that you
okay.
testified that defendant's exhibit 512, which is on the screen,
Yes,
is a picture of the downstairs of the main apartment?
that's correct.
And the main apartment is Penthouse 5 in the Eastern Columbia building, right?
No, depends on what, the main apartment's penthouse 3 generally when we say main apartment.
Penthouse 5 was where you had your closet?
The downstairs was kind of like had some of my painting studio set up and a reception area. Upstairs was the closet.
Got it.
Mezzanine office was in between.
All right, so it's your testimony that defendant's exhibit 512 reflects damage to the penthouse 5, that occurred during the December 15th, 2015 incident, right?
I'm just
Sorry
not
about
sure from which incident this is a picture of, since I'm only looking at
Even
a
though your
partial
counsel
floor.
was asking you questions about December 15th, 2015, and then admitted this picture into evidence
Again,
in
in my
relation to that incident.
sorry, go ahead.
In
What?
relation to that incident on December 15th, 2015. This exhibit, defendant's exhibit, you are the defendant, number 512, was admitted into evidence in this court. You testified that this was a result of damage that occurred on December 15th, 2015. Yes or no?
I just need to orient myself because I'm just looking at a picture of a partial
No,
picture of a
Ms. Hurd,
floor.
you
I
didn't
need
just
to
look at a
orient
picture.
myself.
You looked
Like,
at your testimony.
oh my
I-
God.
You pointed me towards the page and then asked me a question. I haven't actually reviewed it. I don't know if this was submitted in relation to that incident.
Let's actually leave up defendant's 512 and please pull up defendant's exhibit 725 which is already in
Camille's
evidence.
trying to get her on
Thank
in
something.
redacted form, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You can publish.
Just side by side. You've seen this photograph as well, right?
I have.
On the third day of your direct testimony, you testified that this photograph reflected spilled wine in Penthouse 5 on May 21st, 2016, didn't you?
Again, I don't know because I'm looking at a partial picture of a floor. So unless you remove the metadata you've covered up, we could then tell. If you
I didn't
remove-
cover it up, Your Honor.
Ooh,
we unredacted
it so
metadata.
you could get
Okay,
context.
Amber, let's talk
That's how
about
it's in evidence.
metadata.
That's how it's
Alright.
in evidence.
Next
Well,
question.
the metadata next to it is so that
Ms.
to
Hurd,
avoid this
Ms.
sort of
Hurd,
confusion.
there is no question pending, and I would appreciate it if you wouldn't be making argument to the jury.
Sorry, I
Oh,
thought you had asked me
wow.
about it.
No, I didn't ask you about anything. Let's look at your direct testimony from the third day. May I approach?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's turn to page 4750
Oh,
in day
those
17
thank you.
transcript.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
4750. Specifically line 16. Do you see where Ms. Bredehoff asked you to describe for the jury what took place on May 21st, 2016?
I see that.
And do you see that your testimony is reflected about May 21, 2015
Yes.
that follows? Okay.
Yes.
Now let's turn to page 4804 at line 14. 4804. Starting at line 14
Yes.
through 4805, line 4.
Going to what line?
Line 4 at 4805. Do you see that you're testifying that defendant's exhibit 725, which is reflected on the right side, reflects spilled wine on the floor in penthouse 5?
That's correct.
Okay, and defendant's exhibit 512 and 725 seem to be different versions of the same picture, don't they?
That's correct.
So which is it? Which one was taken on December 15th, 2015, or May 21st, 2016?
If you remove the redacted metadata, you can find out. It's right there.
Or if you're telling the truth, you would know.
Recognize a portion of of spilled wine on a floor, and I'm supposed to know off the top of my head when you lived through 5 years of this stuff? I don't think so. That's not how that works.
Oh, wow. I don't think so. That's not
Thank
how
you,
that
Tom.
works.
Ms. Hurd, at the beginning of your cross-examination
Your
last
Honor, may
week,
we approach?
Yes.
Oh, they want to approach. Here we go. More approaching. Like, this trial is just so upsetting, honestly. Like, it really is, because it's, for me anyway, like, I firmly believe that Amber Heard is a liar. I believe she is lying about everything that she is claiming. I believe she is lying about it. And I think it's a very scary thing in this world how there was a point in time, I mean, hopefully we're not in that place anymore, but there was a point in time where we just believed all women just because, oh, let's believe all women. And I'm not saying don't believe people, but I'm saying anybody can make an accusation. Anybody.
All right,
Anybody
ladies and
can come
gentlemen in
out
the
today,
gallery, I
tomorrow,
would
and make
ask
an
that there be no
accusation about
words or
me
no
and you.
phrases, no words,
Here we go, we're back.
no sounds at all coming from you. If I hear one more sound, I will clear the gallery and we will
Ooh.
continue this testimony without anybody in the courtroom. Understood? Good. All right, your next question.
Ms. Hurd, at the beginning of your cross-examination last week, I showed you an audio where you told Mr. Depp to tell the jury, tell the judge, tell the world that he is a victim of domestic abuse. Do you remember that?
That's correct.
And you testified you found it hard to believe that Mr. Depp would tell the world that he's a victim of domestic abuse, didn't you?
I said I find it hard to believe that he would do that knowing that he himself had beat me up for 5 years.
But he has told the world that he's your victim of domestic abuse, hasn't he?
Well, he started to say that only recently. He didn't make that claim up until very recently. So when we signed our divorce agreement and we signed a statement
Amber,
saying that neither
please.
party had ever said false claims for financial gain, it was relevant and important to me because I was the only one making the accusations. I was the only one making those claims. He wasn't doing that at the time, and he signed his name to it.
You didn't expect as many people to show up and testify on his behalf that did you?
Incorrect.
When you told this jury under oath that you never assaulted, actually, strike that. Sorry. When you told this jury under
Neil's
oath that
going
you
in
punched
right
Mr.
now.
Depp because you
Like,
thought of
she's going
Mr.
in.
Depp pushing Kate Moss down the stairs, you didn't expect Miss Moss to agree to testify that never happened, did you?
Incorrect. I know how many people will come out of the woodwork to be in support of Johnny.
Oh
So you
my
think
clear
Miss
by this
Moss
courtroom
needs
how
to
many
come
people
out
will
of the
do that.
woodwork to testify for Mr. Depp?
Everybody who was around in the 90s and the early aughts knew
Oh
that
my
rumor.
God.
I had heard that rumor from multiple people. Of course, that's what flashed through my head when my violent husband not only swung for me, but all of a sudden swung for my sister. Of course I thought of that.
Okay.
I did not
Oh,
expect her to
I
show up
can't.
or not expect her to show up. It didn't matter. It doesn't change what I believed at the time when we were on the stairs and I thought he was going to kill my sister by pushing her down the stairs.
You told this jury under oath that Mr. Depp was aggressive and trashed a trailer in Hicksville. You didn't expect the manager of the Hicksville property, Morgan Knight, to come forward and testify that was untrue, did you?
Incorrect. I've already been through trials with this man. I know how many people will come out in support of him.
When you told this jury under oath that you had no idea that the paparazzi would be at the courthouse on May 27th, 2016, you didn't expect a TMZ employee to show up to testify that TMZ had been alerted that you would be at the courthouse and knew exactly which side of your face to take a picture of, did you?
I know how many people will come out and say whatever for him. That's his power. That's why I wrote the op-ed. I was speaking to that phenomenon. How many people will come out in
she
support
wrote
of
the
him
op-ed.
and will fall to his power.
wrote the
He is a
op-ed.
very
She just said
powerful
it.
man and people love currying favor with powerful men.
That's
And
why
I know
wrote
that
and
the
firsthand.
op-ed.
received
She
jail
just
time for
said
committing
that.
perjury?
Excuse me? I didn't hear your
You
question.
didn't hear
Excuse
my
me?
question?
Ms. Vasquez, if you do mind,
Curry-
please just repeat the question. I didn't hear you.
Curry favor and commit perjury in this courtroom
I have
for
seen
a
people
powerful
do this.
man?
I have seen people do this time and time again. That's why I wrote the op-ed.
You didn't expect Ben King, the house
That's why I
manager in
wrote an op-
Australia, to show
wrote an
up
op-ed.
from England. He flew from
Again.
England to testify that
Camille,
Mr. Depp's
pounce on
fingertip was
that.
found
Oh my
exactly where
God.
he said it would be. Did you?
I have never heard Johnny testify to knowing where his finger was, or really, frankly, making a claim that he knew where it was when it was found. I've never heard Johnny claim that.
You didn't expect
Johnny
Keenan
doesn't-
Wyatt.
Johnny has never
Ms.
actually
Heard.
said that.
Ms. Heard.
And
I think the
Ben
jury
King,
can,
yes.
Ms. Heard, there's no question pending. You didn't expect Keenan Wyatt, Mr. Depp's longtime sound technician, to show up and testify that Mr. Depp is not being fed lines through his earpieces, but instead music, did you?
Not that it matters much, but of course I did. I know how his employees treat him.
So you
I know how
probably-
his team treats him. Of course I expected that.
Okay, so you probably expected Isaac Baruch to come and testify for Mr. Depp, right?
I'm not sure I thought about that.
Yeah, but you didn't expect Mr. Baruch to weep for Mr. Depp after what you've put him through and so many others with your lies,
I
did you?
relate to Isaac because he and I are
There's
the
no
only
further
ones who
questions, Your
cried
Honor.
on this
Wow.
stand.
Nothing further.
Oh, wow.
Redirect.
No further questions now. Redirect. Oh my God.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Heard, if Mr. Baruch felt misled, who misled him?
Johnny, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him from crying. This is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Vasquez has suggested that you faked bruises on your face. Is that true?
Absolutely not. I didn't need to.
Did you ever fake an injury caused by Mr. Depp?
No.
Is any of the evidence of your injuries that has been put to the jury in this trial fake?
No, absolutely not.
And to the extent that there may be some confusion over when a picture of spilled wine was taken, why might that be?
There's so
Lack of
many,
foundation.
Overruled.
because there's so many incidents of violence. There's so many pictures. There's so much evidence. Most people don't have this kind of evidence for years, 5 years. And when I was saying that to
Okay.
Johnny on the phone in that recording, I was saying
For someone who takes so
years
many
this has been
pictures and
going on. And I
videos,
have pictures, we have texts,
you
we
would
have
think
everything.
she would have
Normally you don't get
so
this amount
much
of evidence.
more.
That's what I was pointing
Give me a
out to
break.
Johnny. It would be crazy to try to challenge this in this way. It's crazy. It's easy to not know the context of a picture of spilled wine because there are so many more important details, pictures, and also so much I didn't photograph, so much I didn't have the presence of
Objection,
mind to document.
non-responsive.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Did Mr. Depp abuse you physically,
Yes,
verbally,
yes,
emotionally,
yes,
psychologically?
yes.
How did the threats that Mr. Depp made against you individually years ago
Wow.
resemble what
Wow,
you've
wow,
endured as a
wow.
result of the Depp-Waldman statements?
Beyond the scope of cross, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Johnny promised me he would ruin me, that he'd ruin my career, he'd take my life from me. Death was the only way out. And if I got out, this is what he'd do to me. He'd make me think of him every single day. He promised me global humiliation. You saw those texts. What he couldn't do, the work of one individual, meaning Johnny, when he was inviting a disgruntled employee over for a spot of purple to fix my flabby ass up, that revenge that he sought back then was just what he could do as an individual, calling the studio to get me fired, trying to block him.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation, speculation, hearsay,
all in
non-responsive.
I'll sustain as a non-response.
Ms. Hurd, how did those things that you just testified to that Mr. Depp did, how did those resemble what happened to you after the Depp-Waldman counterclaim statements were made?
Those are
Objection, Your
just,
Honor. Lack of foundation.
She's,
Overruled.
thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
those are just an echo of
Oh,
what
wow.
I'm living through today. It's like what
There's
I'm
only a
living
few
in right
minutes
now.
left
What
of
you
this,
see in this
but
courtroom is
I
an
thought we were gonna
echo.
stop here,
This
but I
courtroom
think I
and the
might
other
do,
courtroom he dragged me into to do the same thing again.
Dr.
That's just an
Curry's
echo of the violence and the
testimony from this
abuse
past
that I
week.
suffered within our
I think I'm gonna
relationship.
do that.
The
after
campaigns
this.
to have me fired, the blocking me to try to ruin my career, the threats he's made to humiliate me globally are being lived out in real time in front of you, ladies and gentlemen, for the past 6 weeks and for the whole world since our camera's here.
No further questions. Thank you so much, Amber.
All right, Ms. Hurd, you can have a seat next to your attorneys. If I can have the attorneys approach.
All right, it's over. All right, it's over. So let me see here. So I
We'll do
wasn't
closing argument here Tuesday morning.
so I wasn't planning on doing any more, but I didn't realize that we'd have so much more time. So I'm gonna do Dr. Curry's testimony from this past week. So let me share my screen with you all. Yep, okay. So yeah, we can do that and we can react to that because I heard that was actually pretty good too. Dr. Curry is always really good. So yeah. Here we go. Okay. All right. So we got it up. I can see it. You can see it. We can all see it. And here we go.
You're still under oath, so please have a seat, doctor.
Morning.
Good morning, Dr. Curry.
Good morning.
Can you remind the jury who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Dr. Shannon Curry. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist, and I'm here today to rebut the
I love
testimony
how
that was
well
provided
spoken
by
she
Dr.
is. Like
Hughes.
she's so well spoken.
Which of the opinions rendered by Dr. Hughes do you intend to rebut?
So generally speaking, there are three main categories that I'd like to talk about today. So the first is that Dr. Hughes misrepresented the tests and the results that she utilized in her evaluation. She misrepresented my testing and the results that I obtained in my evaluation. And she communicated in a manner, provided testimony in a manner that presented essentially her own opinions and the self-report of Ms. Hurd as facts.
Oh my God, I love
Okay, the
Dr.
first
Curry. Who
category
doesn't
you
love
talked
Dr.
about was
Curry?
misrepresentation of her own test methods and results. What do you mean by that?
So Dr. Hughes she stated that she administered 12 tests. In actuality, she used 8 checklists. About half of those were symptom checklists.
And
The other
by the
half
way,
were
again, this is why I'm
checklists
using
about
the long time
experiences
YouTube
that
channel
people can
videos
have with
this time
domestic
because
violence. And
they
those
just
are
put the
not
multiple angles
appropriate for
together,
forensic settings.
in the
They
same
are
video,
easily
which,
exploited.
I like that. I like that we get to see multiple angles.
Other issues that you intend to address relative to misrepresentation of own results?
Yes, so in addition to using these checklist measures, which are easily exploited in a forensic context, they're developed for research or treatment only. She also stated that these checklists revealed things that they simply cannot reveal, especially in this context. Let's see. She also misrepresented information, clear indications on several of the objective measures that she offered.
Dr. Curry is always ready.
And there were indications visible that Ms. Hurd had essentially engaged in what we call response distortion. So clear indications of exaggeration on one of the measures that's specific to PTSD, clear minimization of symptoms intentional on another more broad personality and psychopathology-based measure that she gave to Ms. Hurd, which she did not acknowledge.
Did you intend to address anything relative to the CAPS 5?
Wow.
I did. So Dr. Hughes administered the CAPS 5 about 10 days after I did, almost 2 years after she initially tested Ms. Hurd. And she did not administer the test appropriately. So she left major components blank. She didn't apply the scoring rules that are clearly outlined with the test. And yet she diagnosed Ms. Hurd with PTSD based on that assessment.
What about Dr. Hughes's use of the personality assessment?
Dr. Curry knows her facts. She's a good expert
of
witness.
the tests that Dr. Hughes administered, 2 would be considered, of those 12, 2 would be considered what we call forensically relevant instruments, meaning that they're objective enough and they provide us with some information about how the examinee approached the test, that it would be appropriate for this setting where the examinee is going to have a natural incentive to present themselves in a way that benefits the outcome of their case. Now, on the PAI, there were clear indications that Ms. Hurd was responding and obtained scores in a manner that's consistent with individuals who have a personality disorder. And there was also an indication that several scales, we call this a configuration. So you might have one main scale that you notice is elevated, then you look for additional subscale information to get additional information on what could be elevating that scale. And there was a configuration that showed that even though Ms. Hurd had moderately elevated one of the scales that can be associated with trauma, that elevation is better explained by childhood or distant traumatic experiences like the complex trauma Ms. Hurd reported experiencing growing up.
Okay. You said that
Amber's face is everything.
That Dr. Hughes utilized checklists that are not appropriate for forensic analysis. Can you explain that?
Yes. So as I said, in any sort of forensic context, whether it's a civil or a criminal matter, a person who's being evaluated is going to have major incentive to present in a way that benefits the outcome of their case. So you always approach the examination, I believe Dr. Hughes said, with a healthy dose of skepticism. But that alone is not enough. We have to operationalize that. So
Dr. Curry knows her
we
stuff.
actually
She
have to
knows
administer
her
very
stuff.
comprehensive objective tests that either control for attempts to manipulate the test results or reveal attempts to manipulate the test results, so that we're not just blindly accepting the results or the self-report of the examinee.
How many tests were administered by Dr. Hughes?
She said that she administered 12 tests.
How many of them were appropriate for forensic physical examination?
So the trauma symptom inventory is appropriate. It's an objective measure, and it does have two primary scales that look at how the person approached the test. The personality assessment inventory is an excellent test. It is a broadband measure, meaning that it captures not only symptoms of mental illness, but also general personality traits. That also gives us pretty detailed scales similar to that one test I administered, the MMPI, that tell us a lot of nuanced information about the way the person approached the test. She also administered a malingering screen that can be very, very useful, but not in this context. So it's called the Miller Forensic Assessment Symptom Test. It's a brief set of questions that you ask the examinee, and it's been shown by research to be extremely effective at identifying an examinee's attempts to fake a severe mental illness or psychosis. And psychosis is when somebody loses complete connection with reality. It's excellent for that purpose. It's actually been shown in the research to not be effective at all for identifying a respondent's attempts to fake PTSD, anxiety, or mood disorders. The questions are just too odd for somebody who has the wherewithal to be trying to have PTSD to endorse. They see through it. So she used that. That's a fine test, but not appropriate for this context.
Of the various tests that she administered, how many were these checklists?
8 of them.
All right, and what are you talking about specifically?
Okay. So I had mentioned that there were 2 main categories of checklists she used. The first is the symptom checklists. Those included
again, she's all about the facts. Like,
it's a brief inventory.
She's straight
of
to the
items
facts.
that
Here are the facts.
essentially show
This is
all of
what's
the
up.
symptoms of depression
That's
that a
it.
person might
Period.
have, and you rate which level of severity you have for each question. She also gave the Beck anxiety inventory, very similar, but just with questions about anxiety. She gave the mood disorder questionnaire, which is a very brief, again, checklist. It shows symptoms of bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is a mood disorder where you might have an extended manic episode and then a very extended depressive episode. And then she gave the post-traumatic stress disorder checklist, and that is a screening instrument only. It contains every single symptom of PTSD. So there's a secondary danger here too. When you think about it, given that PTSD is the most frequently feigned and claimed diagnosis in civil courts, if you're handing somebody a checklist that lists every single symptom of PTSD, you're essentially teaching them all the little nuances that we're looking for to give that diagnosis. So she gave that to Ms. Hurd. Ms. Hurd endorsed most of the items, and Dr. Hughes diagnosed her with PTSD and substantiated that opinion by Ms. Hurd's checking those items on the PCL-5.
Were there another group of checklists that Dr. Hughes used?
Yes, so she also, and I forgot one on the last because I don't think of it as one, but previously I'd explained, and I do not expect you to remember, it's called the Life Events Checklist, which is just an inventory of experiences a person may have gone through that are traumatic. Dr. Hughes also used that, and that's appropriate to use before the clinician-administered PTSD scale, the gold standard CAPS-5. However, she administered this long ago before she gave the CAPS-5. Now that going on to the second group, there were 3 checklists that she gave that are specific to abuse. And the first she gave, the danger assessment scale, was actually developed for use
Dr. Curry.
by nursing
I really
staff
do.
in an emergency room setting.
I think she's great.
Specifically for female victims of intimate partner violence. The purpose of this is important because our forensic ethics, our psychology ethics talk a lot about relevance. is the test relevant to the purpose? And the danger assessment scale, its initial purpose was completely different. This was developed to show high risk factors for dangerousness and pretty much to help a female who is in an extremely abusive partnership, who is in the emergency room with extreme injuries, to stop rationalizing, because if she has to check off all the things that have happened that year that have been dangerous, does he own a gun? Has he, I won't go into all of them, but the more she checks off, the more likely it is that she might realize that she is in imminent danger, and then accept resources offered by the hospital and social work to protect her. That was the purpose of this scale. It was never intended to be used as a retrospective measure to look back in time and find out whether abuse was occurring based on one person's report years later in a litigation. She also gave the conflict tactics scale revised, the second edition. Similarly, this scale was developed for research purposes, to research family violence. Again, there's no control for exaggeration or minimizing. It was just given to research participants anonymously so that we could get data on the prevalence of abuse and how abusive dynamics work. And on that, there's 39 questions where the respondent indicates essentially certain abusive behaviors they may have engaged in, and then 39 where they indicate behaviors their partner might have engaged in. And obviously, you can understand that in a forensic setting, the respondent is likely to put a very minimal amount of behaviors they engaged in, and then extremely increase the number of behaviors their partner might have. And then lastly, let's see, the abusive behaviors observation checklist was the third checklist she gave. This one has not, there's no known research even on its effectiveness for what it was developed. It's a theoretical, very brief checklist that was meant to be used for therapy, where an individual who had experienced domestic violence could essentially read through some of the behaviors that constitute violence that they might not have been aware of. And if those behaviors applied to them, or if some of those coping strategies were ones they utilized, they would check that off. And then they have a way to talk about it because now it's been put to words. Again, this is similarly problematic if you're in a civil litigation, the person's motivated to have the results be consistent with a claim or an allegation of intimate partner violence and an allegation that they've been severely harmed, then they could simply just check off more. And not only that, but checklists like this one specifically give a lot of nuanced information about what clinicians might be looking for when they're assessing whether violence was present or whether the person's self-report is consistent with a genuine self-report of having been victimized. They're given all that information that we might be looking for.
Can you talk specifically about Dr. Hughes's use of I think you called it the PCL-5?
Yes. So the PCL-5 is the post-traumatic stress disorder checklist. This is different, not to be confused with the CAPS-5, which I've talked about previously as being the gold standard. The PCL-5 was developed by the National Center of PTSD. It's intended for treatment. So if I were, for instance, working with a service member who I know had been in combat, I would probably give this as a standard with my intake. Before we do the diagnostic interview, it kind of gives me a read on how somebody who's there for treatment, who we assume can be taken at their word, because if they give us correct information, they're going to get an appropriate treatment. And if they give us incorrect, they might not get the treatment they need. So I would give this checklist to them. And then if they recognize some of those symptoms of PTSD, they could check it off. And that would probably indicate to me that I need to then do the next step. If they're checking off more items than not, I would probably decide to administer the clinician-administered PTSD scale, that gold standard interview, to find out more about a diagnosis.
The last thing is what everybody refers to as the CAPS-5.
Yes, the CAPS-5.
What about, well, you talked about forensic use. What do you mean by that?
So when I'm talking about forensic evaluation, that's an evaluation that isn't done for therapy or treatment. It's specifically to assist the fact finder, to assist the judge or the jury in the court by providing information about the psychological status about an individual. And that's an important delineation too. We are not psychologists. I wish we were mind readers. I wish we had a crystal ball and could find out whether intimate partner violence occurred and look back in the past. But it's nothing like that. Really, it's a lot less interesting. We look at data. We have to control for those response biases. And then we also are looking at functioning, which is really the bottom line of the assessment. Did the person have a change in functioning from before the alleged trauma, or in this case, the alleged IPV, to after? Is there a decline in the way they're going about their lives?
And Your Honor, may we approach?
All right.
So they've approached, and again, this is what I call court quiet time. Let's see if I can fast forward. Come on. Okay.
Dr. Curry, let's look back at some of those domestic violence checklists that you were talking about.
Okay.
And did you see any problem with the use of those?
Yes.
What problems did you see?
Well, Doctor, first of all, they shouldn't be used. So we do have professional standards that require that we utilize instruments that are relevant and appropriate for the particular setting, and that we substantiate our opinions based on data that is reliable from tested, accurate, reliable tests for the purpose. So there's that. It's inconsistent with the ethics. And essentially, they just shouldn't be used. They don't provide us with the robust information that it would be expected in such a high stakes setting.
Would you have expected Dr. Hughes to comment on the limitations of the checklist she was using?
Yes. So first of all, Dr. Hughes provided opinions based on these checklists. So she referenced especially the danger assessment scale several times throughout her testimony, stating that Ms. Heard was in a very dangerous situation. We also have an ethical guideline and a professional standard as well that indicate that whenever there is question about the reliability and the validity, and in psychology, we use the term validity to talk about accuracy. of any of the methods that we're using to collect data, we clearly communicate not only that there are limitations to our opinions, but we also need to provide the fact finder with information about what the potential implications or impact could actually be. So, for instance, if we use a scale that's idiosyncratic for the purpose, but we would first need to explain why we made that decision to not follow standard procedures. And then we would need to explain the use of this scale might introduce some potential exaggeration of this symptom. And so I'm trying to control for that way, but that was one of the limitations of my opinion. You have to make it very clear. Transparency is really at the center of good science in general.
You talked a little bit about ignoring response distortion. What is response distortion?
Response distortion is a term that speaks generally about an examinee approaching a test and providing answers that are either exaggerated or minimized, but in some way an inaccurate representation of their current mental status or their experience.
What test do you believe that Dr. Hughes failed to acknowledge response distortion on?
So she administered the personality assessment inventory, which is similar to the test I gave, the MMPI-2. It's that general broadband measure of psychopathology symptoms and personality traits. It includes several scales that are very good at detecting either exaggeration, minimization, or even trying to claim that you have unusually good qualities. On that test, there were clear indicators that Ms. Hurd, very similar to the way she approached my MMPI, engaged in defensiveness. And in fact, there's a function that you can look at. So you have that main scale elevation, we call it positive impression management, was elevated. And then, because we want to make sure that somebody isn't elevating that scale just because they have such well-being, there are additional configurations of scales that you can look at to find out what's going on. And so the Cashel discriminant function is sort of the name of one of these configurations, these equations that are done. And she was highly elevated on that. In fact, that elevation tells you that no, this isn't accidental. This isn't because she's just doing so well in life that she has an extremely, extremely low amount of problems. No, this is an intentional over-reporting, or I'm sorry, an intentional effort to minimize any appearance of having problems.
Now, you may have addressed this, but there was a reference to malingering.
Yes. So what's interesting about Ms. Hurd's approach to different tests is that it seems to be influenced by what we call the face validity of questions on the test. So if a test looks like it's measuring PTSD, you see exaggeration on her validity scales. If the test has less face valid questions, for instance, the personality assessment, which Dr. Hughes administered, the MMPI-2, which I administered, where she can't quite figure out what the questions are asking, they seem really banal in general. On those, you see extreme defensiveness, minimization of any potential pathology, essentially presenting herself as perfect and free of any mental illness or personality disorder. But on the trauma symptom inventory, which Dr. Hughes administered, that was the one that I previously indicated for ease of explanation. When the test results come out for how the person approaches the test, that test itself prints it as a percentage. And there's a really excellent scale for finding out if a person is exaggerating their symptoms of PTSD. It's called the atypical response scale. And the TSI-2 is the revised version of this test, and that scale was improved this time around to really try to be a clean indication of, is this person exaggerating? And it puts quite high questions in the test that are so unusual. They might sound like PTSD, but even the most severe cases of PTSD don't have these symptoms. And so somebody who's intentionally trying to exaggerate PTSD, or possibly unintentionally, but nonetheless, who's exaggerating it, is likely to endorse these items, even though they're not real PTSD symptoms. Ms. Hurd scored so highly on this that even if there is, although Dr. Hughes correctly said, there tends to be a negative skew when people have the high levels of distress that's associated with PTSD. So sometimes people score higher on this, even when they do have PTSD. She scored so high that that is effectively ruled out as a possibility.
Okay. What about Dr. Hughes's administration and use of the CAPS-5?
Okay, yes. So Dr. Hughes had diagnosed Ms. Hurd with PTSD back in 2019 when she began testing her. It wasn't till 2 years later, more than 2 years later, 10 days after I administered the CAPS-5 with Ms. Hurd, that Dr. Hughes held an impromptu evaluation session.
Again, Dr. Curry is very just straight to the point.
CAPS-5.
Yeah.
She had previously diagnosed PTSD without using what we consider to be the gold standard PTSD diagnostic interview. And again, when we're doing a forensic evaluation, it is an important responsibility, and part of our ethics and professional standards are that we document everything to allow for transparency and full judicial scrutiny. And Dr. Hughes administered incorrectly. She left huge sections, very relevant sections blank. There's no way to understand why she scored it as high as she did based on the information that's provided. You're essentially supposed to notate the examinee's responses as verbatim as possible to explain your reasoning and implying their scoring procedure. It's a standardized test. And if you don't follow those standard procedures, it's completely invalid. Not only that, but it looks as though Dr. Hughes further invalidated it by trying to show that she had assessed for the childhood trauma impact. And she had said that she went back and asked the childhood question, but you can't do that. If you're assessing for two separate periods of one's life to find out the relatedness to PTSD, you do two separate CAPS interviews, period. You don't create your own question system. That is non-standard administration of the test, and it invalidates it.
All right. You also mentioned with respect to the PAI, or the Personality Assessment Inventory, that Dr. Hughes failed to mention some elements. What did she fail to mention?
Oh, okay. So on the Personality Assessment Inventory, so first she failed to mention that there were clear indications of response distortion. She also failed to mention that Ms. Hurd scored in her score profile against their main scores. She did elevate a score for the borderline personality disorder sort of section, but that in and of itself would not indicate a diagnosis. However, the configuration of her scores overall is consistent with that. And in fact, it's one of the diagnostic suggestions given by the test itself. And then also there's a configuration around Ms. Hurd's trauma responses on that particular test, which demonstrates that it is more likely that those symptoms were reported in relation to something in the distant childhood. It's more consistent with childhood chronic abuse than present circumstances or recent circumstances.
Okay, I think you said in addition to the issues with her own testing, Dr. Hughes misrepresented your results.
She did.
Can you tell us how?
So what I would say the main issue was that she said that Ms. Hurd obtained a normal profile on my MMPI-2.
All right. How do you disagree with Dr. Hughes relative to the profile?
Okay, so the profile was not normal. So Ms. Hurd already had subtle elevations just by the test by itself as it came out. There were subtle elevations, but they were elevations that if the validity scales hadn't been as elevated as they were, you might have said this person has some traits, but this isn't necessarily at the level of a true pathology. However, Ms. Hurd elevated a scale that essentially is a defensiveness scale on this test. And when you're giving this test, you always are mindful of different norms or groups who may have similar profiles. And there are certain groups of litigants who tend to elevate this scale as well. So I had that in mind. However, Ms. Heard elevated this so much that it was far beyond the mean for the litigants that are known to have the highest levels of this scale, this defensiveness scale. And when this scale is elevated to the level that it is, you automatically understand that it is very likely that those clinical scales, I keep doing this because I'm seeing it in my head. It looks like sort of an ECT. It's sort of these peaks you see on a graph. And when you see these peaks and you have this huge peak over here for the defensiveness scale, what you know is that these peaks are artificially, they've been lowered or suppressed based on the respondent being so defensive. They still detected what's likely there for her, but it's not as high as it should be. So you make an adjustment. And the recommendation is that anything at 60 or above, we call it a T-score of 60 or above, is considered significant. Ms. Heard's were already over 60. Some were quite higher than that. And then you see a very clear profile. And that was how I got that. I mentioned a 3-6 code type. Now, the test does its own correction also for some of the scores, but not the ones that are her main code type. With the test correction, she had a 1-3-6 code type, which is very similar.
What is a 3-6 code type?
A 3-6 code type is something that has been researched and found to be highly correlated or probabilistic of certain behavioral tendencies and personality traits. And the traits with a 3-6 code type tend to be marked by a lot of externalization of blame, a lot of denial about one's own personal faults, intentional or not intentional, but just extreme denial, hostility that is strongly controlled and suppressed. The person may not even realize how hostile they are, but family members, those closest to them, are very likely to report that they lose their temper, and when they lose their temper, it explodes. We have sort of what we call a cookbook for these code types, which will provide you with all the information that's been researched to be associated with them. And our cookbook actually states that 3-6 profile specifically tends to be associated with cruel and ruthless behavior, particularly to those who they perceive as less powerful than them and subordinates.
Describe for the jury the review process that you went through relative to the MMPI.
So I conducted a very methodical analysis of the scores. I do this for every test, and I also did it when I was reviewing Dr. Hughes's scores. So what you haven't seen that's in Discovery is that I created a 25-page outline just of her scores with, and it's sort of a table. So I'll put the score, I'll do it in sections so that I can understand different groupings, different research studies. And I start with looking at all the validity scales. So I put in the score, and I'll even color the table to show me if it's kind of in the high zone, moderate zone, or low. And then if it's low, is it a significant low score, or is it just low so it doesn't mean anything? And then in the right side, I put all the research data that I found on this particular scale score. And so I start with the validity scales, the way the person approached the test. Then I go down to essentially, we call these the first factor. So their overall sense of well-being and how well they cope. On this, actually, Ms. Heard's, she endorsed scores or endorsed items that were the opposite of PTSD. So really saying that she feels free of distress and that she views herself very well. So then I go down to control, self-control, loss of control, coping abilities, and I put in the scores that are associated with that in the research and the test development. Then I go down to clinical and personality pathology, and I look at all the scores that are significant there, first with the top level main scores, then with all of the different sub-scores, again, citing the research, the meaning, the level of elevation, and what that means.
She knows what she's talking about.
I
She
do
is
comparison with different research groups. So for Ms. Heard, I did a section that looked at all sorts of different scores that have been implicated with a PTSD presentation to see if any of those were consistent. I can't remember how many there were. I think I put 13 on there, but I could be wrong. But I believe that there was only one that could even be, in some research, is sometimes associated with it, but it was general anxiety, which turned out to be more trait specific. I looked at the scores that are typical of women with IPV. Hers were not consistent at all with those. I looked at the scores that were consistent with people who are frequently in litigation. Hers actually were very highly correlated with those. That tends to be also consistent with a 3-6 code type. And the reason for that is believed to be that they tend to perceive themselves often as victims who need to avenge wrongs.
Were there other results you believe Dr. Hughes to have misrepresented?
That was scathing.
For instance,
whatever.
the TSI-2.
Yes. So Dr. Hughes generally said that testing supported PTSD and that there was an etiology for her trauma of intimate partner violence. She did reference that essentially I can't remember if she said that the trauma symptom inventory indicated PTSD, but she did say that the elevation on that validity scale is consistent with PTSD, and that's simply not true. That scale was designed and has been tested and shown to be there to show when somebody is endorsing extremely unusual items that are not consistent with PTSD. And even though when some people are experiencing PTSD, their distress level is so high that they'll engage in what we call a cry for help, and they may sometimes exaggerate distress. Again, when you're looking at scores as high as Ms. Hurd's, and then you're not seeing indications of PTSD in the more subtle tests where she doesn't know what she's endorsing, it's good evidence that her over-endorsement on that one test is because of the reason the scale was made, to detect exaggeration and feigning of symptoms.
Is this the test that resulted in the 98th percentile score?
Yes, on that atypical response scale.
And what does that 98th percentile score represent?
So that 98th percentile score just represents that among 98% of people who take that test would not have endorsed. She scored more of those unusual items that are not consistent with PTSD than 98% of people who have ever taken that test.
Does that relate to this concept you talked about before called feigning?
Yes.
What is feigning again?
Well, feigning is essentially exaggerating symptoms of a disorder.
I think the third thing you indicated you were going to talk about was self-reports and personal opinion as facts. What are you talking about there?
So in any science and in psychology specifically, it's really important that we use precise language and we say what we mean, and we do not present opinions as facts, because when you are in the role of an expert witness, or an expert in any setting, essentially a layperson may not be able to detect the difference between something that is a personal opinion that you're giving versus something that is substantiated by research data, test data, reliable test methods. So our ethics talk about, especially the specialty guidelines of forensic psychology, the responsibility we have to distinguish between data.
I like this testimony.
And inferences we're making from that
Dr.
data,
Torrey,
what the data can mean, sort of like those
she knows
tables
what
I
she's
do, like
talking
with the
about.
data, the inferences based on the research, and then what my ultimate opinion is, integrating all of that data. And it's very important that we clarify that to the fact finder, to the judge, the jury. That's our responsibility, that we do not cloak personal opinions or the self-report of an examinee as an expert fact or somehow scientifically based when it is just a personal opinion or self-report of an examinee.
What do you mean by self-report?
The self-report is essentially what the examinee tells you during the interview.
Okay. When did Dr. Hughes do this most?
She did this most when describing instances of alleged IPV. And there's also an issue there because one of our ethics also discusses the importance of relevance and withholding, essentially constraining our testimony to the data and not including private information, personal information that unnecessarily compromises the dignity of any of the litigants. She provided a lot of what was Ms. Heard's report to her, the allegations of abuse, when describing Mr. Depp, who she had not examined, when describing Mr. Depp's behavior, his motivations. I believe she used the word obsessive jealousy quite a few times, talked about Ms. Heard being in a highly dangerous situation. These are simply things that we cannot detect based on testing and a psychological evaluation. We have to evaluate the person, we have to get consent, and we can only describe an individual, not whether or not IPV has occurred. And we certainly shouldn't go into explicit details about sexual encounters or other things that are highly prejudicial, shocking, and hard to forget.
Hello and welcome to
Dr.
this.
Hughes
Anybody
says
new
that
that's
Ms.
in
Heard has
here,
PTSD. You
join
agree?
the chat.
I do
You can
not.
also click
Why
the
not?
link on the pinned
The
comment in the
results
chat
of
to get
my
on screen with me and
multi-method
have a
comprehensive
discussion about
evaluation
this
based on
trial.
carefully
Come on, let's do it.
selected, researched, relevant test instruments, based on comparing those instruments to Ms. Heard's self-report, observing Ms. Heard's behavior over 12 direct hours of assessment, reviewing copious notes from prior therapists who indicated symptoms in their notes, reviewing the notes of Nurse Filati, previously Nurse Borum, who spent, I believe at one point, almost 2 months with Ms. Heard daily, reviewing the notes of her treating providers, all of the legal documents and discovery. There was no evidence of PTSD.
How is evidence of PTSD generally exhibited?
So really the bottom line in a forensic psychological evaluation is a change in functioning. That's what we're looking for. Again, I said, we don't have a crystal ball. We're not wizards. We can't get into somebody's head. What we're looking for were there identifiable changes in the way the person engaged in their world. Were they able to keep a job? PTSD is an extremely disabling diagnosis. When a person has true PTSD, it is difficult for them to work. You'll see unemployment, job loss. It causes extreme levels of distress and impairment. There's divorce, there's isolation and estrangement from children, from family members, extreme alcohol abuse, often a string of sudden DUIs when the person never had any before. They become homebound, they can't go to the store. They're certainly not going to events. They're not having success in their film career, usually. They're not exercising every day, pursuing their hobbies, being avid readers, obtaining level 3 sommelier training, having dinner parties with friends, speaking to public groups. Those are just indications of very high functioning. And when you're looking for a decrease in functioning over time, that is inconsistent with that decrease.
What about Dr. Hughes' suggestion that Mr. Waldman's statements served as a trigger for Ms. Heard's PTSD?
All right.
Oh, it's quiet time. In court, I believe they have approached. Let's see if we can skip through this.
I would say that it can't be triggered if PTSD isn't present.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
All right. Cross-examination.
Dr. Curry, I just want to make sure that we all remember, you're not board certified, correct?
No, I'm not.
Okay. And you've been licensed for how long?
I've been licensed for 10 years.
Okay. And you are being paid by Mr. Depp's legal team to be here, correct?
Yes.
How much have you charged so far?
I actually don't know.
Over 100,000?
I truly don't know. I don't do my own books.
Over 200,000?
I don't know.
Over 300,000?
That would be way too much, but do not know.
Okay. Now, just so that we all remember, you had dinner at Mr. Depp's house for 3 to 4 hours with Mr. Depp, Mr. Waldman, Mr. Chu, and Ms. Vasquez, correct?
I was interviewed. I asked if there was anything I could eat because at about 3 hours I started to get hungry. Mr. Depp then offered to order takeout for the entire team.
So you had dinner at Mr. Depp's home with Mr. Waldman, Mr. Chu, Ms. Vasquez, and Mr. Depp, correct?
Yes.
And you had drinks as well, correct?
I actually don't know. I do remember that there were drinks.
Do you recall testifying earlier that you did have a drink, a mule something?
No, I remember testifying that there might have been a mule, a Moscow mule.
Okay, thank you. We didn't have animals there as well, right?
No animals.
Okay, that's good to know.
Mhm.
And you talked about transparency. I just want to make sure you had several designations, expert designations and reports in this case, correct?
Yes.
And in not one of them did you disclose that you had dinner and drinks at Mr. Depp's house for 3 to 4 hours with Mr. Waldman, Mr. Chu, and Ms. Vasquez. Is that correct?
Ms. Bredehoff, you're mischaracterizing what occurred.
Dr. Curry, please answer the question. Not once did you disclose this in any of your reports,
I did not
correct?
disclose that I was interviewed as that standard procedure.
But it's true that you have never gone to a client's house to be interviewed for an expert witness position, correct?
Yes, because I never had a client that was essentially homebound because of their celebrity status.
All right. And you talked to Mr. Depp for 3 to 4 hours before taking on the role of assessing Ms. Heard and deciding whether she was suffering from any distress, correct?
I did not talk to Mr. Depp. I was talking to his legal team and he was there to observe.
He was present for the 3 to 4
Yes.
hours. Oh, and are you saying now he just stayed silent and said nothing all day?
I don't recall what he didn't or didn't do. I was answering questions.
Okay. Now, your expertise here is limited to whether Amber Heard suffers from PTSD currently. Is that correct?
Yes, I was tasked with conducting an evaluation to
Okay,
determine
Dr.
Ms.
Curry,
Heard's mental
you know, we're all on
status.
very, very strict time limitations
Okay.
because we promised to get this case to the jury. So I'd really appreciate if you just answer my question rather than trying to go further,
Sure.
okay? Thank you very much. Now, after you had the dinner, you then provided a designation in February of 2021 in which you said, and this is long before you ever saw Amber Heard, correct? You said that Amber Heard, quote, exhibits patterns of behavior that are consistent with co-occurring cluster B personality disorder traits, especially borderline personality disorder, end of quote, correct?
No,
No, we went through this before.
we did.
But, and that was
Interesting.
on the
Elaine, give me a
designation, was
break.
it not?
Stop.
I told you last time that I did not write
Come
that.
on.
Okay, and you don't
Elaine
know
is
who
so
did on the legal
annoying.
team, correct?
No,
Okay, and then I also asked you, if you may recall, whether you listened to the audio recording in which Mr. Depp taunted Amber Heard that she had a borderline personality disorder. Do you recall that?
I recall you asking me that, yes.
Did you recall listening to that audio tape?
I don't recall Mr. Depp taunting Ms. Heard. I do recall that he at some point suggested she might have that diagnosis.
Okay, and that was back in these audio tapes back when they were together, correct?
Yes,
Okay, now you've never before been asked to testify or serve as an expert with respect to someone who has bipolar disorder, correct?
no, as I previously stated, that's not true.
Okay.
All right. My extra copies were all distributed before. Does everybody have those?
Not up here anymore.
Okay, my apologies, but I'm going to go ahead.
Your Honor, can we approach?
All right.
Okay, looks like they're approaching, so we have more quiet time in court. Let's see if we can fast forward.
2022, correct?
Yes,
And you were under oath at that time, correct?
Yes.
And the question I just showed you on page 207, line 5, have you ever been asked to testify or serve as an expert with respect to whether someone has bipolar disorder? And your answer at that time was no, correct?
Yes, I had forgotten that case.
Okay. And have you ever been asked to testify whether anyone has behavioral or characterological conduct that suggests they may be an IPV perpetrator?
I may have. It's difficult. After about 250 cases, it's difficult to remember specifically.
All right. And have you ever been qualified as an expert in the area of IPV?
No.
And have you ever been qualified to testify as an expert in domestic abuse or violence?
Domestic
abuse or violence?
Yes, that's been a component of testimony.
All right.
Me on that. Can I take a look? You want? Okay.
Line 16 of page
Dr. Curry is
207. Have you
laughing
ever
like,
been
oh,
qualified
okay.
as an expert in the area of IPV? Your answer on line 20 was no, under oath, correct? Then the next question, have you ever been qualified to testify as an expert in domestic abuse or violence? That and goes into page 208, line 4. The answer then under oath was no. Now, you would agree that the literature is quite clear that trauma-based symptoms such as PTSD or complex PTSD have symptoms that overlap with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And you would agree that it's important to use valid and reliable measures for an accurate diagnosis, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. You chose, however, not to administer the structured clinical interview for DSM-5 personality disorders, the SCID. Is that correct?
I did.
Okay. And would you agree that that is a state-of-the-art structured clinical interview?
Not for a forensic evaluation with a sophisticated examinee.
But to determine if a personality disorder is present?
No, not in this setting.
You don't agree with that?
I do not.
And you don't agree that that is the gold standard assessment for reliable, accurate psychiatric diagnosis?
It's a good one.
She
but
holds
for
her
treatment
ground. I like
settings
that.
especially.
Okay. Now, did Ms. Hurd, you said you talked about, you read all of the treatment records, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall reading the treatment records for the psychologist Bonnie Jacobs, who saw Amber Heard over 5 years?
I do.
And did you see anything in Bonnie Jacobs' notes over 5 years in which she diagnosed Ms. Heard with borderline personality or histrionic personality disorder?
No.
Now, you also saw the notes of Dr. Connell Cohen, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you even attended his deposition, correct?
Yes.
All right. And he saw Amber for roughly 2 years. He was part of the Dr. Kipper connection,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And did you see anything in Dr. Cowan's notes? And did he say in his deposition that he diagnosed Amber Heard with borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder?
I saw the symptoms clearly delineated throughout his notes and in his deposition. He does not use diagnoses, so he would not have diagnosed her.
He said specifically in his deposition he did not diagnose her with that, correct?
Yes, and he also specifically stated that he does not use diagnoses.
All right. And you also have seen Dr. Banks, Dr. Amy Banks, the psychiatrist, her deposition, correct?
Yes.
And did Dr.
Not her
Anderson,
deposition. I reviewed her notes in the transcript.
all right. Did Dr. Anderson diagnose Ms. Heard with borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder?
I don't believe she provided any diagnosis since she was a couples therapist.
All right. Now, you've said quite a bit about Don Hughes, but do you remember how many years of experience Don Hughes has in IPV and domestic abuse and violence?
I know it's quite a bit.
Extensive. And she is board certified, correct?
Yes, she is.
All right. And she spent 29 hours of examination with Amber Heard. Did she not?
Yes, mostly
Okay.
interviewing.
All right, and she interviewed her therapists, Bonnie Jacobs and Conan Cowell, correct?
Yes,
And she also interviewed Amber's late mother.
yes,
Okay, and she administered 12 different tests over the period of that time, correct?
well, as I said, the majority of those were checklists, which are inappropriate for the forensic setting.
I understand that's what you say, but she administered 12 different tests, correct?
If you want to qualify them as tests, sure.
Okay. And so you disregard no, I'm not even going to say that. Okay. Let's go to the CAPS-5 and PTSD. Now, you assessed Ms. Heard's traumas in her life, correct?
Yes, I did
Okay.
give her an instrument to assess for any trauma exposure throughout the entire lifespan.
Yes, that's fine. And you wrote that Ms. Heard's exposure to a traumatic event, namely one of the sexual assaults by Mr. Depp, more than satisfied this requirement. Did you not write that in your notes?
That is not what I wrote in my notes. Do you have my notes? So we
And
can
you
look at that?
administered a structured clinical interview based on that trauma, correct?
Not exactly. It's not quite right.
Okay. Now, Dr. Hughes administered a full intimate partner violence assessment, correct?
That's not a psychological assessment. We can't assess for intimate partner violence. That's an event.
Dr. Hughes administered a full intimate partner violence assessment,
She
correct?
stated that, and that's actually something I'm rebutting today.
Come on, guys.
And
Come up
you
on the
reviewed her
screen. Click the
psychological
link
testing.
in the
I
pinned
sure did,
comment
yes.
Okay, and are you
in the
aware
chat.
that in September
And come up. It's
2019,
StreamYard.
Ms. Heard
It's
had a
very
trauma-based
easy.
symptom
You don't have to
on
show
many
your
of those
face.
valid tests?
Come on up.
Can you be a little bit more specific? Many of those valid tests, which tests are you talking
Do
about?
you have a recollection of that, September 2019?
She administered all of her testing in September 2019, so I'm not sure which one, except for the CAPS-5, which was 10 days after mine in 2021.
Now, Dr. Hughes clinically evaluated those symptoms and established that Ms. Heard does have PTSD from the totality of the intimate partner violence by Mr. Depp, correct?
That's what she stated, yes.
Okay. Now, Dr. Anderson's clinical notes that said Amber had come to...
Objection, hearsay.
I haven't even asked the question yet, Your Honor.
Are you going to read her notes?
Well, no, actually, I wasn't going to read her notes. I was
Okay.
going to ask a particular question.
Okay.
You talked about danger. Do you recall that in your testimony?
Yes,
All right. Now, if a patient comes to you as a couples therapist
Mhm.
with two black eyes, would you assess that there may be a potential danger there?
sure.
Okay. Did you read Dr. Anderson's notes?
I believe I did.
Now, you administered the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 2, the MMPI-2. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you used that to determine whether Amber had PTSD, right?
Not by itself, but it was a part of the data.
Okay. And in the 60 to 70 T-score range for that test, which, quote, deliberate attempts to mislead are uncommon, end quote. Isn't that correct?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
In the T-score section of that, for which assesses deliberate attempts to mislead, do you recall? She scored a 60 on that test, correct?
So there are multiple T-scores for each scale, so I'm not sure which scale you're talking about.
Okay. Well, we can deal with that later. So you would agree that you need to follow ethics and best practices in forensic psychology, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And the two primary sources are the American Psychological Association Ethical Principles and Professional Code of Conduct, right?
Mhm.
And the American Psychological Association's Specialty Guidelines for Forensic Psychology, correct?
yes,
And Specialty Guidelines 1.02 states that forensic practitioners, quote, strive for accuracy, impartiality, fairness, and independence, correct?
yes,
Okay. And Specialty Guidelines 1.03 states that you have to avoid a conflict of interest, correct?
yes.
Now, in addition to not listing the 4 hours you spent with Mr. Depp, Mr. Waldman, Mr. Chu, and Ms. Vasquez, you also did not list that you spent an hour with Dr. Shah, correct?
That's incorrect.
You say that the designation said that you spent
During my
an hour-
deposition, I also clarified this. I didn't spend an hour with Dr. Shaw. There was an introduction with the attorneys present on Zoom. My time on that call was less than 30 minutes.
Okay. But you still didn't disclose it, did you, in your reports?
No.
Okay. Now, you have not been asked to testify about Ms. Heard's behavior in the context of her relationship with Mr. Depp. Is that correct?
I was asked to testify about somebody's behavioral mental status in general, so that can include behavior involved in a relationship with Mr. Depp, but not specifically.
Can you pull up day 10 of the trial testimony at page 2710? Are you able to do that, Michelle? 2710, lines 12 through 18.
All right, guys. So we are done for this video. If you were here, thank you so much for joining me. It's been fun rewatching stuff. I think I'll probably either come back later tonight or definitely tomorrow with the closing arguments, and we'll go through those. So anyway, if you haven't, please hit the subscribe button down below, hit the thumbs up button. And yes, I will see you in another video very